I've been following a story locally about how the office that licenses police officers and peace officers in the state of Minnesota released the name of 257 undercover police officers to the public. They say they did it inadvertently and that it was an accident. I kind of want to get into this a little bit. I think it's worth noting. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Fallout of release of Minnesota undercovers names hit placed more home security amended lawsuit says. This goes through and describes a lawsuit being brought to against Post, P-O-S-T, for the release of the names of 257 undercover police officers they say was inadvertent. And I have no evidence to doubt them. I'm sure it was. But it raises a lot of questions. A lot of questions. Some of the questions that, well, led kind of down rabbit holes and kind of identified a problem, in my mind, a possible issue we may have with this. And I certainly hope an investigation takes place. The lawsuit in Ramsey County on behalf of the affected officers alleged the State Board of Peace Officers and Training violated the Minnesota Governance Data Practices Act. The state law says information about undercover officers is private. We're going to watch this video here in a moment. A local independent journalist, Tony Webster, requested public information from the Post Board in August. He said in a statement that the Post Board explicitly told him they had removed undercover officers' names from the data sheet they initially sent to him. We're going to go through his statement as well because it's very important and it kind of goes where I'm going. The Post director notified Webster on January 21st that he'd inadvertently sent me data identifying every undercover officer in the state. He said he wanted to make a public comment until a database of the website of the Invisible Institute, a nonprofit organization, was updated to remove the undercover officer's name. Now, I looked through the Post Board because this is rife incompetence. Or maybe it's more. We have had a Supreme Court ruling leaked. We know that there are people who do leak things. And this is just my opinion. But I think there's justifiable cause for an investigation. Because the board isn't just police officers. This is the makeup of the Post Board. I am 100% confident that none of these people highlighted here would do anything to compromise officers' safety on purpose. If this was just a clerical error, then that's exactly what it is. But the questions I'm raising are this. In Minnesota, in the halls of government in St. Paul and Minneapolis, there is such a hatred for law enforcement. It runs deep, very deep. It is literally a hatred for law enforcement. If you listen to these people talk, the people who are actually in control of this state, of Minnesota, they want to cut law enforcement off if they possibly can. This is the state that wanted to defund the police first and most, and they still try in Minneapolis. 6 community members, 4 representing community-specific boards under Statute 15-0145 and 3.922. 1 advocate for victims appointed by Violence Free Minnesota. 1 mental health advocate appointed by Minnesota chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and 4 members appointed by the legislature. Those members would have been appointed by the legislature of 2022, which were controlled completely by the DFL in this state. The DFL that passed, worth a video on itself, laws that will, one, be hard to repeal, two, are completely immoral, and three, are onerous on their taxation, but not the point of this video. So what are these boards? Well, Minnesota Statute Section 15 and 3.992 tell us. Who are these community-specific boards? Ethnic councils. Ethnic councils. So, we have here in statute, Minnesota law, and on the post board, the very board designed for the licensing of law enforcement in this state, you have statutory DEI. And if you go through this statute, it explains what those councils are and what they do. So section 922. So there's one Native American on the council as well. So we have 6 community members, 4 of which are going to come from DEI, statutory DEI councils, 1 for an anti-violence council, 1 for a mental health council, and 4 members appointed by a legislature that is DFL at the time of appointing. So what I'm saying right here, let's first, before I give my opinion, let's go through Tony Webster's statement. Statement on Minnesota Post Board's wrongful release of undercover officer data. In August 2024, I was sent Minnesota Board of Peace Officers Standards and Training a public records request for police licensing data. Other researchers and journalists had tried, but the agency dragged their feet. The goal was to investigate the issue of traveling officers who move from agency to agency without disciplinary records following them. Historically, these officers are in a group that is more likely to repeat disciplinary issues go undetected. The Post Board gave me the data in 2 separate spreadsheets, and the agency explicitly told me they had removed the names of undercover officers from the data sheet. Some of the data was published online by a nonprofit news organization. On January 21st, 2025, almost 5 months after the state gave me the data, I woke up to an email from the state post board director, immediately got on the phone with him, and he told me that he had inadvertently sent me data identifying every undercover officer in the state. Every single one. This is horrific. Specifically, this included the first name, middle name, last name, dates of birth, agency affiliation, license number, and employment dates. I ensured dates of birth were never published online. The Post Board has acknowledged that this is entirely their error and their fault. Nevertheless, this incident is disturbing to me, and I fully cooperated with the Post Board. I dropped everything I was doing and worked diligently to get the data taken offline, and it has been taken offline. However, the data was distributed to news organizations and downloadable by anyone and is likely distributed beyond any assurance of effective recall. That means it's out there. That this data is out there. And had it been downloaded by somebody and posted somewhere else that they don't know about, he's admitting it's out there. The Post Board is sending notices to 257 police officers. I am not confident that the number is accurate because many of the officers they told me today are serving in undercover capacity or are publicly identified as government websites as police officers and even maintain public LinkedIn pages identifying themselves as police officers. Okay, if you're an undercover cop, you might want to take off your LinkedIn. I believe the Post Board should investigate this more fully to ensure accuracy. It is my long-standing practice to alert government agencies when they wrongfully give me private data and not to use that data. Alarmingly, it happens pretty regularly. In this instance, I had no way of knowing which officers were undercover, and I had received the government's direct promise that the data was stripped of undercover officers. It is my practice to report agencies who wrongfully release private data to ensure accountability. I've reported the Post Board to authorities. I am concerned for the officers whose data was wrongfully released by the state. I am also concerned that this incident will be used to attack our public records laws. Our laws are fine. The Post Board broke existing law. The law provides penalty, and I believe that will be held accountable. I don't believe they'll be held accountable at all. I don't believe at all that they'll be held accountable. Look at the makeup of this board. Just look at the makeup of this board. I assure you that none of these people will be held to account. Not one. One of these might, just because of the disdain that so many of the members of this group have for the top group. That's possible, but I assure you the group in blue, nothing. There will be no accountability, which is why my radar went up on this. Now I want to go to the Care 11 story. They're covering this decently. But I want to point to the very, very end of this, and I want you to take note at the incompetence. This is just sheer incompetence of the state of Minnesota. We go to this now.
Lawsuit claims a big mistake has put the lives of hundreds of Minnesota police officers at risk. It alleges the Post Board, which licenses Minnesota officers, wrongfully revealed more than 250 names of those working undercover. Lou Goose joins us now with more on how this mistake was finally discovered. Lou?
Rena, the names of the undercover officers were posted online for 5 months without anyone realizing it until, according to court documents, an officer browsing online found names listed provided by the state Post Board that should have been kept private.
The nonprofit website Invisible Institute has a data tool showing police employment history for states across the country. Journalist and law student Tony Webster, who's an expert on Minnesota's data practices law, says he provided the site data he received from the Minnesota Post Board through a records request. Webster says the Post Board, the state board that licenses police officers in Minnesota, specified to him at that time that the data did not include the names of undercover police officers, which is considered private data. But according to a lawsuit filed by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, an officer browsing the site found a huge mistake. The state accidentally included the names of 257 undercover police officers in the data provided to Webster. The names were not labeled, so Webster had no way to know. But in a statement, he says, quote, "When I found out, I dropped everything I was doing and worked to get the data taken offline. But it has been distributed beyond effective recall." Deputy Director of the MPPOA, David Titus, says in a court filing in part, "I cannot understate the harm that would come if these undercover police officers' identities are publicly disclosed. The targets of those investigations could retaliate or cause them harm. The investigations these officers are working on could also be prejudiced or completely undermined by this disclosure." The Post Board Executive Director acknowledged the mistake in an email that says in part, Post learned yesterday that it inadvertently included the above information for officers designated by their agencies as undercover. Although the data do not directly disclose or indicate the undercover status of any officer, this information on undercover officers is not public data.
Lou, is that information still available online?
Well, no. Tony Webster worked with the website Invisible Institute to immediately take down the names, and they replaced it with a list of officers that is public data, no undercover officers included. But like he mentioned in his statement, it's impossible to know who downloaded the data over the previous 5 months. Rena?
Well, and now if you have the list of officers that are not undercover and you have a list to compare it to, that seems like that could be even more problemsome.
Yeah, hopefully nobody did the data over the previous 5 months. Rena?
Well, and now if you have the list of officers that are not undercover and you have a list to compare it to, that seems like that could be even more problems.
Rena?
Well, and now if you have the list of officers that are not undercover and you have a list to compare it to, that seems like that could be even more problemsome.
Rena?
Well, and now if you have the list of officers that are not undercover and you have a list to compare it to, that seems like that could be even more problemsome.
You got the point. And the state of Minnesota releases a redacted list. Do you see the problem? They release a redacted list. Okay, we're not going to include their names now. You don't come out with a list then. You say, you know what, matter dropped. Dropped. At the very least, you refuse and you take it to court explaining the data breach to stall it. You do anything you can. Such incompetence is what rules this state. So yes, this could very well be just incompetence. It's very likely just incompetence. However, if you live in Minnesota, or you've lived in Minnesota, you know very well the disdain these city councils, the bureaucracy, the left wing, the Democrat legislature has in this state for law enforcement. You know it. And would somebody on this board have no problem releasing it? In my opinion, the percentage chance is not zero, and there should be an investigation. That's just my thoughts. I wanted to cover this. I know it's a Minnesota issue, but if you live in a large metropolitan city, Chicago, New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Seattle, Denver, Houston, this type thing is possible. It's possible. Especially in the blue states like Cali, New York, Washington. Yeah. The percentage chance is not zero, and that's the problem. Is it very likely clerical error? Very likely. But the fact that I'm putting this video out with what I think is at least evidence that points to a percentage chance not being zero, considering what we've had happen over the last 5-8 years, we've had Supreme Court rulings leaked. Anything's possible. It's just my opinion, all of it, but I wanted to put it out there. I really appreciate you stopping by and listening to it. Thank you.